I adore the story of Zenless Zone Zero 1.6. It explores murder and its relationship to morality, which is a topic of discussion that's been around likely for millennia. Yet, Zenless's twist on this dilemma makes things interesting, as they choose to explore this idea through the dynamic of Hugo Vlad and Von Lycon, the two of which being more similar than they would like to admit. Alright. Okay. Lycon condemns the act of killing, not necessarily out of the naive idea that letting people live is inherently a noble thing to do. Rather, in the words of his master Jack, killing is wrong because humans lack the authority to make such heavy decisions. And more importantly, you can't simply give back a life that has been taken. In other words, as humans, we are bound to make mistakes in judgment. Therefore, the irreversible act of killing is immoral due to our inherent flaws. We cannot be trusted to enact final judgment. Hugo, on the other hand, believes that for the greater good, killing is necessary. Sometimes there is such evil in this world that would cause way more harm to others if they were not put down. Hugo, being both the son and victim of the corrupt upper class of New Eridu, has seen firsthand the evil that some of these individuals possess, and he even saw the impact of not intervening firsthand. Because of his experience, he feels as if it's his duty to interfere and that he needs to make a choice before more people get hurt. In his eyes, murder is a necessary evil. While in theory, both of their points are valid and understandable, the part that makes this conflict intriguing is that in practice, when trying to enact their ideals, the cracks in their philosophy begin to show. It is implied that Hugo's way of thinking is flawed, not only due to Lycon's counter-reasonings, but also factoring in the idea that Hugo may not be acting for justice, but rather a more personal reason such as revenge. So while his reasoning may be upheld, it may be nothing more than just an excuse to fuel the cycle of hatred that runs in his family. And while he may have good intentions, the inherent evils of murder may actually corrupt him to the point of no return. His corruption is subtly shown in the fact that despite his kind, polite, and noble attitude and spirit, when faced with a sinner, Hugo becomes a sadist and takes pleasure in inflicting pain upon them. If killing is supposed to be for the great or good, why is it necessary to toy around and play with your food? This would only be done out of enjoyment, hatred, and spite. If Hugo is giving into these emotions, then he himself is not worthy of being judge, jury, and executioner. He is the exact reason why Lycon says humans are not able to make these choices. But remember, Lycon's philosophy falters in practice as well, and this is best shown through the ending of version 1.6's story. Using Bringer's notebook, we find the location of a sacrifice, and Hugo reveals that he's been working with one of the corrupt upper class, a man named Hartman. He later reveals that he is Hartman's nephew, and his true goal was to get close to Hartman, murder him, and gain control of the sacrifice, in order to gain favor with Tops, New Eridu's upper class, so that he would have the resources to bring justice into this world. If Hugo were to help Tops, they would allow the Exaltus to release sacrifices into New Eridu, which would ruin the mayor's reputation and increase their political power. In return, many casualties would have resulted, in part due to Hugo's cooperation. In order to put an end to Hugo's dangerous ambitions, we engage in combat for a second time. When defeated, Hugo takes Proxy hostage, asking for a sacrifice core in return for our safety. And after giving him the sacrifice core, Hugo continues to threaten our life. This leads to the climax of the story.
Go on, kill me. If you've got the guts, do it, traitor.
This scene is absolute cinema. Lycon does not speak a single word when carrying out the deed, and the dark shadow in the scene makes it so that his face is barely visible, making him seem like a monster, which can be seen with how Vivian seems mortified by Lycon's actions. While this may seem like a complete 180 for the character, Lycon himself has hints of a more brutal side. In his previous altercations with Hugo, he seems to be uncharacteristically angry. He moves and acts more erratically, seemingly giving in to rage, and his hits seem to have more lethal intent. In one of his voice lines, he says,
"I'll bite your throat out!"
which suggests that, under his polite exterior, when pushed to the edge, Lycon is completely capable of cold-blooded murder. And in this moment, our noble and unwavering idealistic Lycon can no longer hold on to his philosophies. Yes, people cannot be the ones to decide if others should live or die, but the proxy is an individual that is loved and respected by not only himself, but the entirety of Victoria's housekeeping. Someone that important being endangered forced Lycon to break his no-kill rule, and shows that, despite Hugo's flawed ideology, the no-kill principle is inherently naive, and that when push comes to shove, even the most honorable and righteous individuals must make the difficult choice, but necessary one, to take a life. Before this scene, Hugo asks us to take care of Vivian for him, meaning that he likely planned for everything to go this way. And as a meta look into the story, since we know he shows up in the next story part, and is going to become a playable character, it's obvious that Hugo will survive this encounter. I mention this because Hugo gives a little smile before falling into certain death, almost as if he's smugly saying, "I was right." Up until this point, while they gave both perspectives, making Hugo into the antagonist inherently makes Lycon's point of view the one favored by the story. It's clear that near the end, Hugo was willing to make too many sacrifices due to his philosophy, but Lycon shows that you can't effectively provide protection by letting everyone live. This moment isn't just hype, climactic, or exist only for the shock value. It's a test of themes and messages present throughout the story. It forces the ideals of these two characters to clash, and when the dust settles, the audience needs to put together the parts and decide for themselves what is right and wrong. This is what makes this scene so brilliant. Trusting the audience to come up with their own conclusions shows a higher level of complexity to the storytelling, and shows that Hoyoverse trusts its audiences to comprehend the narrative. This moment makes version 1.6 one of my favorite story sections throughout Hoyoverse's catalog, and I was excited to see how they followed up this plot point up, since we know Hugo needs to return.
I'm glad you still remember the code we set all those years ago. And thank you for ensuring your sleight of hand didn't deteriorate. Oh, right. I should also thank the blood bag hidden in my clothes and our other props. Do you remember when we last used this trick? It was probably ages ago.
Yup, after 8 or 9 minutes of analysis of the ending scene, this is how they decide to follow it up. This scene is from the follow-up story in 1.7, and it's purely and utterly disappointing to me. We knew Hugo wasn't really dead, but the implication of Lycon having the intent to kill him made the moral philosophy that he carries less credible, which in turn makes the moral dilemma much more morally gray. But that's the thing, it only comes from the implication that Lycon was willing to kill Hugo. By having Lycon be in on the plan, is the game telling us Lycon didn't actually fold in his moral principles, and thus his ideology still stands as the correct and right choice. Now, I understand that this scene logically makes sense. Lycon claimed that his hand went through Hugo's heart in the previous chapter, meaning Hugo would have had to do some bullshit to get out of that scenario and trick everyone. And considering that Hugo clearly had a plan the entire time, and the fact that these two were very close in the past, it's not implausible that these two would be able to pull off an act like this. Even for the purpose of the story, using this act to distract and trick Hartman makes it easier for Hugo to move about and achieve his goals from the shadows. For all of these reasons, if you want to defend or even love this scene for providing an effective plot twist that actually wasn't done that badly, be my guest, because when it comes to logic and moving the story forward, this option does indeed leave less and less plot holes. But why should we settle for a story just because it makes sense? Without getting too deep into it, they conclude this plot point and a moral dilemma introduced in this chapter shortly after, which I could likely make another video on, but for the implications present in 1.6's endings, all of the impact ends at this moment. I can't help but think this could have been so much more interesting. Imagine this. Imagine if Lycon wasn't in on the plan, and that Hugo found some sort of other trick to make his way out. Imagine if one day, deep in reflection about his decision, a familiar individual sneaks up on him. The self-righteous and naive Lycon. You say we cannot make the call to take life, yet you stand here today. Hypocrite would be the word that suits you most. Why the long face? It's almost like you've seen a ghost. Using whatever explanation they can, having Hugo survive a fatal wound like that would make Hugo seem like a force of nature, and would serve as the plot twist in place of the story they actually went with. Imagine if Lycon actually had to put conscious thought and rethink his ideals as he sorts through the conflicted emotions of killing the one that used to be close to him. Lycon himself could have had a story arc where we wonder when exactly is it okay to cross the line, or if Lycon is redeemable for going against his principles. Not to mention, Hugo can keep going down his dark path and ideology, justifying it by mentioning how even the most righteous individuals will eventually resort to murder if necessary. From a logical perspective, it is indeed harder to make this plot point work, but I believe in the concept that, in a story, theme is the most critical part. Even if you have to suspend your disbelief to make the story work, storytelling is an art, and a crucial aspect of art is the message that it conveys to the audience. Therefore, within reason, it's okay to stretch the logic of plot points if it means you can tell a more impactful and meaningful narrative. And when I see this bloodbag scene, I do not see a 1000 IQ Code Geass plot twist. What I see is wasted potential that ruins any meaning that the 1.6 finale could have had. For all the reasons stated in the first section of this video, the ending of 1.6 could have made the story that it was trying to tell a more complex one by exploring the gray area of murder in which it's hard to decide where certain lines are crossed. But instead, they decided to cheapen the experience by removing the one factor that gave rise to all of these moral questions, turning the scene from an intriguing exploration of morality into a scene that was used mainly for spectacle and shock value. When I see the scene, it hurts because I feel like Hoyo showed a glimpse of telling a genuinely philosophy-inducing story, but decided to turn it into a generic anime plot point. It hurts because I feel as if Hoyoverse is capable of so much more, yet in one scene, it feels like they completely betray their own storytelling. This scene has bothered me a lot since I first seen it, and to be honest, I don't like trashing on the games I love, but seeing as we're entering Season 2 of Zenless Zone Zero, I want to see the story reach its full potential. That's why I'm pointing this moment out, because even if I heavily dislike what they did with this plot point, it tells me Zenless Zone Zero has the potential to tell a truly amazing story. One of ZZZ's biggest strengths is that, due to its smaller scale setting, Rather than needing to focus on huge world-ending threats, a bigger focus can be put on the complex and darker issues we see in real life. The big issue with the game is that it tends to touch upon these ideals, but not go any deeper. And I think Hoyo and Lycon's dynamic is a victim of this effect. I'm praying that Season 2's story puts more faith in the player and allows us to walk away from each section with something to think about long after playing. I don't want Hoyoverse to keep relying on cheap fakeouts so that people can repost hype moments to social media just to forget about the story. Well, at least it's the only part of 1.7's story I dislike. What the f-